Perfect. Okay, so hello and welcome to everybody that's just joined us. Thank you for joining us from Facebook and here as well in Zoom. So before I hand over to Amina, I'm just going to introduce you. 1 second. I've got so many things open. Let me just open my notes again. Okay, wonderful. So hello and welcome. Say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And we're very lucky to be here with Amina Douidi. So she holds a doctorate degree from the University of Southampton, where she investigated the intercultural potential of Algerian English textbooks and their use in the classroom. She's an EAP teacher and a diversity, equity and inclusion consultant for publishing houses. So welcome, Amina. Hello, how are you today?
Hi, Joe. You've been doing a wonderful job since this morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And can you tell us where you're speaking to us from today?
I often take webinars like this from where I'm based, Southampton, but at the moment I'm in Aberdeen in Scotland.
Really?
I've been experiencing a different linguistic environment, if I must say.
Yes.
Yes, the accents here are beautiful. Although the weather is grey, the accents make it shiny and beautiful.
Yeah, it is a lovely accent. Oh, that's really interesting and really topical as well, that you've experiencing a different accent from where you are. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to pass everyone over to you. I'm still here if you need me, but I'm going to disappear and hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Joe. I must start by saying that I am deeply, deeply honored to have this platform and to be able to speak about something that I'm so passionate about, which is intercultural communication, intercultural learning. Please do unmute, Joe, and help me confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, that's perfect.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about how to intentionally integrate intercultural competence as a learning outcome in your lessons. And this session was designed based on the feedback that I got from last year's session. Was it last year or the year before that I ran a presentation webinar here with British Council, where I shared ideas on how you can promote interculturality in the classroom. And a lot of the feedback I got was about how do you do it in your specific context, in your pre-established lessons, when you have a textbook that was imposed on you, if so to speak. So that's what this session is about. It addresses that feedback and it focuses on intentionality. So we'll have a reflection task that we'll do together. Shortly, we will share with you a link and we will ask you to contribute with some ideas especially about your context. Then I will share a little bit of theory, focus on 2 intercultural communication models. I know that teachers like these types of theoretical background that would help them situate themselves in the realm of interculturality. And I think it will be useful to know some theoretical basics in order to be able to apply them later on in the classroom. I will share with you practical tasks, one that you can adapt or you create based on what you already have in the classroom. I'll share an example that is very common in ELT. Then I will share with you an example of how you could use authentic materials such as Realia for student-led tasks. If we have time, I'll have a brief example about how you could leverage artificial intelligence, and then we can conclude. So first of all, let's have some discussion in the chat. My colleague here will share with you a link to Mentimeter. The question says, in your opinion, what does teaching intercultural communication entail? I've shared the screen here. Hopefully I will start seeing your responses. I'm gonna try to share the link again. Yes, it's already in the chat. So thank you, Anne. My question then for you is that when somebody is thinking about how to implement interculturality in the classroom, the question I'm asking is, what does that look like basically in the classroom, practically speaking? What does that look like? I'm gonna stop sharing here and come back to you to see some of your responses. Let's see what we have. Here we go. Here are the first responses. Gonna share again. Brilliant. So these are anonymous on purpose. These are responses that are anonymous on purpose, because sometimes when we talk about topics that are sensitive, people don't necessarily feel confident sharing their opinions when they are known. So you can use anonymous polls like these, or anonymous surveys like these, to help you create a safe space that Amy was talking about earlier. And then let's look at some of the responses. So what does it look like to teach intercultural communication in the classroom? The first response here is about taking into consideration everyone's background, including that in lessons regarding readings and exercises. 100%, definitely. So the representation of the self is very important when we are promoting interculturality. Respecting other opinions, checking for understanding, and being able to communicate should be a two-way street. Definitely something you can model as a teacher. When you are having the discussion with your students, you can model that openness to opinions as a teacher, because sometimes when we are in a teacher-centered approach where you have this traditional model of initiation, response, feedback, you don't always have space for dialogue, and it's not necessarily representative of what an natural intercultural communication looks like. So definitely modeling the process with your students. Bringing insights from different parts of the world to the classroom, yes, definitely representing different cultures, different peoples, different experiences in your classroom could be a stepping stone into developing intercultural communication. Representation of diversity around the world is also a way to start engaging in intercultural communication. How the Japanese bow, not shake hands. So this is a typical example that we find in business textbooks a lot. And it basically present a fixity of representation. So if, for example, we take the example of women, I am a Muslim woman, I sometimes shake hand, I sometimes hug, I sometimes just from afar, just wave. Sometimes I don't feel comfortable shaking hands or hugging or kissing anyone. So my action is very varied and diverse depending on context. So it would be quite fixed minded to say that Muslim women don't shake hands, for example, or that all Japanese people bow to greet you, for example. So that's fixity. If we want to have a more authentic and a representation of that, then you would think about it as dependent on context, dependent on people. Some people do, some people don't. So this relativity is very important in intercultural communication, and such examples could be a good starting point to discuss these type of fixity. So instead of orienting the conversation on what do different cultures, how do different cultures greet, you could reflect on, we have this fixed image of this culture. Let's discuss how complex it should be and how this representation might be stereotypical. And that would be an example of intercultural communication in the classroom. I see that a lot of people are taking this this exercise as at heart and sharing their thoughts. Teaching intercultural communication involves fostering understanding and effective interaction between people from diverse backgrounds. Yes, but the question is, and the question I'm asking you is, how does it technically look like in the classroom? Thank you so much. We're gonna move to the next question, which is about, I'm gonna share the screen again, just give me a second, which is about the challenges that you face in the classroom. So you can find the link in the chat. It's the same link, basically. I just put the second question live. You can try and start sharing your responses now. Basically, what I'm asking is, what kind of challenges do you face when you try to promote intercultural learning in your classroom? And some of the challenges that people have shared with me, for example, are the large classrooms, the number of students that they have in the classroom, and sometimes it's very hard to create opportunities for dialogue or role play, for instance, right? So large classroom is a theme that people have shared as being a challenge. For example, lack of time. Sometimes teachers only have 50 minutes to dedicate for 30 to 40 students, right? So these are some of the challenges: time and classroom size. I can see here some other challenges: strict religious perspectives, religious differences, language proficiency sometimes is a challenge. However, I'll share hopefully an example with you that is for basic level of communication, of language proficiency, and hopefully it will help you change your mind and maybe encourage you to promote interculturality even with beginner students learning English. So bias mindsets, a very important point. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'll touch upon that as well. Different backgrounds, religion, culture, language, students more accustomed to L1 in their homes and not very responsive in English class. Crowded classrooms are an obstacle. Insufficient access to updated intercultural learning materials. I would like to challenge this perception through my presentation, so I hope you can stay till the end. Various opposing ideas, conflicting ideas in the classroom, and you definitely don't want your student to fight, and especially if you don't have a teacher assistant with you, or if they are dynamic ones, and very hard to manage. So promoting intercultural learning in the classroom can face challenges such as language barriers, cultural stereotypes, and varying levels of cultural awareness among students. 100%. Thank you so much for sharing. This is very important for me. It's very helpful to know where you are, so that I don't lecture you on how to promote interculturality, but rather share with you ideas and meet you where you are. A lot of teachers are already promoting interculturality in their classroom, but maybe they don't call it interculturality. And I'm hoping that this webinar will make you appreciate what you already do in the classroom. So thanks a lot. All right, so let's speak theory. Now I'm going to talk about two intercultural models: the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, developed by Bennett in 1986 and improved in 2013, mainly used in the business world. Then the second one is the prescriptive model of intercultural communicative competence, developed by Byram in 1997 and was later on revised in 2020, and I will touch upon some of the areas that you need to be aware of regarding these two models. What you hear in the background is my daughter. She's 1 year old and she might join us at some point. All right, so the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. I've highlighted the word developmental because the idea is to focus on growth, on mindset growth, for instance. Moving from the ethnocentric to the ethno-relative is conceptualized as a developmental process, and this process, by going through it or reaching the ethno-relative stage, would mean that you are developing an intercultural sensitivity. Ethnocentric is understood in the sense of your understanding of the world is centered on your own reality. We had some people share in the Mentimeter quiz that some students are too focused in their environments, and they are too exposed to that, or only exposed to people who they know, and sometimes it makes you see the world only through your own perspective, and that puts you in a state of ethnocentrism. Ethno-relativism is where you basically reach more openness, more possibility for adaptation, and so on and so forth. So this model is presented in a form of a continuum that moves from point A to point Z, and the process is meant to help you develop intercultural sensitivity. The model is, of course, presented, as I said, as a continuum. However, it doesn't mean that all those stages are, let's say, linear. It doesn't mean that you are going to go through all these stages in your intercultural journey in order to reach intercultural relativity, right? So it starts with the state of denial, where the other is so far away that even its humanity is not palpable to me. So failing to perceive the existence or relevance of a culture, of a people, of an experience, that would be the case of denial. Well, of course, this is an extreme example that would not be translated similarly in your classroom. So in your classroom, your students may be in a state of denial when they believe that their religion, for example, is the only right religion, or the correct religion, or if their way of eating is the only correct way of eating, or if a recipe should be this way, not that way. We hear it a lot, you know, when we are on social media and we see people talking about Italian food, for example, and they say, you know, if you put ketchup on pasta, they say, oh, this is blasphemy. You can't really put ketchup on pasta, right? So that would be like the right way is my way, right? And that distance is a state of denial. Then comes the state of defense, perceiving specific cultural groups in polarized and evaluative ways. So the other is my enemy, the other is not my friend. And again, I'm going to use the example of Palestine, where, for example, the children are considered minors instead of children. So they're not called children, they are called fragile souls or fragile people. They are still othered, and there is still this distance, but then there's also the sense of the other is my enemy, the other, or what is different can threaten my life. Therefore, I am in a state of defense. Okay. Again, this does not necessarily translate in these extreme terms in your classroom. It could be simply that people don't want to try something out because, or students don't want to try something out because it might affect them somehow. minimization, which is about focusing on shared human experience and universal values to reduce prejudice, and saying things like, in the case of Black Lives Matter, for example, when George Floyd was murdered, there was a movement of people coming out and saying that we are going to center the narrative around Black people, and we're going to say that Black Lives Matter. However, there was a different movement that said all lives matter. So the all lives matter, what they did is minimize the impact that systemic racism has on Black people, and they basically focused on no peace and love, there is no real issue here, we all have universal values, we're all human, and things like that. However, me as a person of color who can be easily passing for a white person doesn't have the same experience as a Black person, right? So I have to acknowledge that systemic racism that has been implemented in our societies for many years and centuries sometimes. So I should not be minimizing the experience of my Black friends, correct? So moving away from that minimization, so instead of saying, all lives matter, which would be a minimization of the Black experience, then I would be, moving away from that and accepting, moving this to the stage of acceptance where I can be attributing equal human complexity to different cultural groups, where basically the same way I perceive pain, other people could perceive pain. The same way I don't like when people talk to me a certain way, I should not be talking to them a certain way, right? So we are kind of reaching the level of equality here when we are accepting that the other is as human as I am. And that's, again, a sense where we are reaching ethno-relativity. Adaptation is generating appropriate and authentic alternative behavior. So, for example, if you are a school and you have children or students or staff or adult learners who are of a certain religion and they need to practice that religion, so you will adapt the space for them, you will adapt the timetable for them so that they could be practicing their cultural practice in a way that is respectful and in a clean environment and in a peaceful environment without being judged or without being penalized. So, for example, not having an exam on a day of prayer or not having an exam on a day of the religious celebration and so on, like something like that. So that would be a state of adaptation. Integration is considered here the ultimate goal, which is including cultural context in decision making and acting with contextual ethical commitments. So if we are to use this in the context of language education, for instance, we had the example of accents, right? My colleague before me have shared how he sometimes encourages people to celebrate their accents in poetry, but at the same time making them aware of the importance of intelligibility. But then the initiative that the teacher has taken to celebrate the accent and the background of the students by integrating them in the classroom. Amy has talked about this creation of safe space as well from the get-go in her presentation earlier. Now we are designing the lesson in a way that everyone is integrated. I am integrating my dyslexic students. I am integrating my my students who are maybe hard hearing or having visual difficulty, or students who have socioeconomic challenges and cannot necessarily afford the technology that this lesson would need. Therefore, I would need to think of a different way to do it. Teachers already do that, and I think you can testify to this. So that would be grosso modo generally what the Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity is about. It's not a model that I would advise to use to assess your students. I definitely don't want you to go in the classroom and say, oh, this student is in a state of denial, or this student is in a state of acceptance. The idea is not to penalize your students if they are in a different journey than yours in their intercultural learning. There could be definitely a process that they would need to do in order to reach certain levels of understanding and empathy and respect. However, I advise against using this, especially in language classroom setting, if in high stake exams. So I don't want to be designing an activity to assess how empathetic a student is, and then if they end up being not really empathetic, I would give them a bad grade, right? So it is important to highlight that this framework is just descriptive. Again, reality is not like this. It doesn't come in a linear way. It just these are just factors and indicators that you can use to see where you will help your student the most. So it will give you an idea of the clashing opinions that have in the classroom. And once you have that, you know what's the next step. So if you have one group of students who are in a state of denial, another group of students who are in a state of acceptance, then you will try to find a way to make them work together so that they develop some sort of coherence. And in the classroom, they don't need to have all the same opinions, but the process is important, and the communication, the way we express these opinions is also important from a linguistic perspective. So the next model that I am sharing with you today is called the prescriptive model of intercultural communicative competence. I put prescriptive in color here because it comes from the word prescription. That's how I learned its meaning, because I linked it to the doctor's prescription, where the doctor tells you what to do. In comparison to the other model that I shared, which was developmental, aimed to be more diagnostic, this one is more aimed to be helpful to the teacher to design a lesson, and helps the teacher to have the how to of designing the lesson. And this is the model that I will be using when I will be sharing with you some of the lessons that I've designed for you. So it is prescriptive, and it aims to provide with the teachers with tools to teach in intercultural communicative competence as a continuation of the communicative competence. So it was designed as an add-up to what you already do in the classroom with learner-centered approaches, task-based approaches. Sorry. Thank you. I'm just gonna take 1 second. All right, so we have 5 dimensions that we can use. I'm just gonna grab some water and be back right away.
Thanks for the well wishes in the chat. So let's take out this time, because it looks really interesting. So have a look at this model and see if you can think about how it would help you to teach intercultural communicative competence. If you can think of any examples or questions, then put them in the chat. You've got lots of people wishing you well. Are you okay?
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it's always bad when you're live. Right, I'm going to disappear again.
Thank you. Apologies. So this prescriptive model is organized around 5 savoirs. The word savoir is something I'm going to use regularly, and let's agree that savoir means knowledge, skills, and attitudes. It's a French word. It sounds fancy. It looks good on a model, but the idea that savoir englobes the word savoir, when you translate it to English, it can be literally translated to knowledge. However, it doesn't, in the French culture, knowledge is too restrictive. Therefore, the use of the word savoir, I think, is more generic. It creates this umbrella term that links knowledge, skills, and attitudes all together. So I'm going to use savoir as a term, and this is the term that Mike Byram uses as well. So these 5 savoirs are knowledge about the self. I'm starting from the left-hand side: knowledge about the self, knowledge about the other, knowledge about how to interact, knowledge about the individual and the societal. And here, this is where you have cultural information, about historical information about a given country, a given group of people, and so on and so forth. So it's one of the layers of promoting intercultural communication. The other savoir is savoir comprendre, which literally would mean knowing how to understand. But when you conceptualize it, savoir comprendre is the skill to interpret and the skill to relate. The other savoir is savoir-être. Literally, it would mean knowing how to be, but conceptually, it means attitudes, relativizing the self and valuing others. And this could be found again in Bennett's developmental model, as I showed you right by the end of the continuum. Savoir apprendre, learning how to learn, which is skills of discovery. Savoir-faire, which is knowing how to do, skills of interaction. And in the middle, at the center, is called education, which is basically political education, but political with small p, not the capital P. Political in the sense of social engagement, global citizenship. And here you would have critical cultural awareness. In French, it would be savoir s'engager, basically getting proactive and taking action. And this is where, theoretically speaking, this is where we would situate tasks and lessons and activities where students would be taking action about the environment, or about inequality that they witness, or things like that. So that's that's the concept that helps you. Okay, so let's look at some practice. I've designed this activity for you because it is very common in ELT to have topics around voyager, traveling, hotels, and this is an activity about choosing a hotel. So I designed it as a pre-task, task, and post-task, basically a task approach. And it starts with these 2 hotels, very common in ELT textbooks, where the students are exposed to the language that they might need in this unit. It helps to activate schemata to start with this. So the task says, the pre-task, sorry, says, look at these 2 hotels, write down what you like and don't like about each. You have Hotel 1, which is near the beach, has air conditioning, check-in is 10 a.m., no pets, no smoking. And Hotel 2, which is a bit far from the beach, has cable TV, has accessible parking. You can see this sign here, which is a positive thing. Check-in is a bit late, 3 p.m., no smoking, no loud music. So this pre-task is basically, let's see it's an individual activity where the learner is reading and getting familiarized with the language, and they are thinking about which hotel they personally like. The next step is to move and talk about the hotel that they have chosen with a partner. and the fact that they will there will be exchanging ideas on which hotel they prefer, they are basically getting to know themselves and getting to know each other and each other's preferences. Very basic level of English. They can use linguistics examples like these that help them articulate their ideas. You can change the example depending on the linguistic item that you are trying to teach. Till now, we are scaffolding the intercultural discussion by first knowing the self and knowing the partner, the classroom partner. So knowledge about the self. We are in the 5 savoirs, savoir in general terms, which is knowledge about the self. Next, they will meet Reda. Reda, who you can see in the picture, is an architecture student who has a guide dog. With your partner, discuss which hotel Reda should choose and why. All right, this is where we're going to think about the other, and we're scaffolding again and thinking about somebody else who is not ourselves and reflecting, relating to them, trying to understand their needs and therefore decide on which hotel. So I'm going to share with you the hotels again, and I will invite you to write in the chat which hotel you think that Reda should choose. I'm just giving you a few minutes, then I'll look at the chat, a few seconds to see which hotel would be preferable for Reda. You would encourage your students to explain why they have chosen Hotel 2, for example. So in the chat, just play along. Tell me which hotel would Reda go for. I can see that there is an overwhelming number of people in the chat saying that Hotel 2 is preferable. I need you to tell me why. I can see that Martina is saying that Hotel 2 is the preferred option because it allows dogs. Hotel 2 is again the preferred option. Fajr bin Rashid is saying Hotel 1 because I'm not sure if he drives, but the beach is closer for Hotel 1. Very good reasoning. The second one, Iliana is saying the second one because it has free pets accepting. So basically the second one doesn't say anything. In the US, the guide dog, this is Paulette Rodriguez, is sharing with us information from a different cultural environment. It says in the US, the guide dog would have to be accepted. So he could, in the US, go to Hotel 1 since it is close to the beach. Very good reasoning, contextualized. Sumia is saying Reda should pick Hotel 2 because the policies does not restrict having pets. I was having this conversation with my husband last night as I was preparing myself for today, and he said a very strong argument. I think he said that the guide dog is part of him, so he's not the guide dog for my husband is not considered a pet. Is considered a person, no, it considered an extension of the abilities of Reda, therefore not necessarily a pet, right? So that, again, it's one of those critical thinking conversations, activities, that could push your student to debate which one is the right hotel. Well, I don't have the right answer because there is no right or wrong answer. You're supposed to think about it and put yourself in the shoes of Reda and think about which would be the best option. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing these examples and these reflections as well. So what we did here is we interpreted the data that the activity gave us, the information about the hotel. We also saw that they have accessible parking. So maybe they are a hotel that have already thought thought about people with disabilities, and therefore maybe they have amenities or facilities for people with guide dogs, correct? So skills of interpreting and skills of relating. We are putting ourselves in the shoes of Reda and thinking about his well-being. So someone said it's closer to the beach, so he can go and enjoy himself in the beach, and things like that. No loud music. Ayumi is sharing he might rely more on sounds as a source of information. So we are deeply engaged with the story of Reda here and listening to, trying to relate to him. Therefore, that kind of reflection, again, we are putting our students in the context of intercultural learning. Next, thank you so much, everyone. Next, we have a post-task or a task of action where the students will be writing an email to the hotel that they chose. So they have to choose either Hotel 1 or Hotel 2 to ask for more information. And the activity could be done in pairs. It could be done individually. This is something you can assess as a teacher. You can assess the skill of interpretation, the reasoning that came about why they chose the hotel, and the argument they would put forward regarding Reda. Again, Reda here is not a charity case. Reda might have hired an agency to find them the hotel, and your student might role play the role of the agency. Also, Reda has a full story. He's an architecture student. He can also go on holidays. He might also enjoy going to the beach. So there is a very complex story around Reda that doesn't necessarily limit him to his disability. Therefore, the choice of the hotel could also include the idea that he wants to party. Maybe does the hotel allow parties? He wants to have friends over. Does the hotel allow you to have friends over? And all those types of reflections give Reda a full story that is not limited to the disability, but does not minimize neither the disability, if I am to refer back to Bennett, 1989, that I shared with you earlier. So the activity about writing to the hotel could be taken a step further. You can ask your student to work on a project and investigate the hotels that they have in their local area, and contact these hotels and see how accessible they are for people with disability, what kind of menu they have, do they have vegan food, do they have halal food. For if you are focusing on the environment, you can ask the question whether they have recycling facilities, and whether they have single-use items, or they have what is their sustainability policy and things like that. So you can definitely take this kind of activity a step further, but the starting point is for you to move from this task, to move from a simple task about hotels that is already available in your classroom, in your textbook, and ask yourself a question as a teacher: who is missing? Who is not represented? Once you as a teacher ask yourself this question, you can design tasks to push your student to reflect on this person who is missing in the representation, and therefore develop the skill of interpreting, the skill of relating, and then critical cultural awareness where they take action. But the responsibility relies on you to question who is missing in the representation. So we purposefully and intentionally addressed 3 learning outcomes. The first one was knowledge about the self, skill to interpret and relate, and critical cultural awareness, writing the email, which would entail taking action. However, two of the byproducts of this experience is relativizing the self and valuing others, and the skill of discovery and the skill of interaction. These were not intentionally included in the activities. However, they might have emerged in the classroom as byproduct of the interculturally oriented session. Next, I'm going to share with you an example of student-led activities using Realia. And here we're going to use pictures that they can take on their way to school. I asked my father yesterday to send me pictures of different stores of where he was, and these are the pictures that I'm going to share with you. My family is very, very involved with this webinar, so everyone has had their way of contributing. So the first activity, you ask your students to gather, take pictures on their way on their way to school. They take pictures of the stores because of the focus on language and multilingualism, for example. They would share their image with their partner, and then the task would be to exchange pictures and say, choose a store from your partner's images. And then B, based on the sign and name of the store, make a list of 3 products which could be sold in there. And that would be basically a way to activate schemata. Okay. The next task, based on this one, we are scaffolding. We can have a list of a collage of different photos, authentic pictures of stores, and we can number them and give them a scenario where they get to relate to somebody else. The question is, meet Jiawei, a visitor from China looking to buy a new phone case. Which store should Jiawei go to? Again, Jiawei needs a phone case. I'm going to share with you the pictures again, and I'm going to go in the chat and see which store Jiawei can go to. We have 4 stores in the screen. However, image 3 has 2 stores, bear in mind. So you need to tell me which store is the store where Jiawei should go to buy a phone case. And I need you to explain why, of course. If you could, in the chat, say, why do you think Jiawei should go to the store that you've chosen? I can see a lot of number 3 ones here. Magdalena is saying 3, many varieties. 3, obviously, it's from the name. It says my cover and has phones and photos on the window. Definitely an interpretation skill that is being developed here. Thank you so much. So we're just again going to interpret and try to relate to the needs of Jiawei. Next, we're having another scenario. And this time, Amina is a hungry tourist looking for halal fast food. Which shop should Amina go to? Here we go. I'm going to look at the chat again, and going to read the comments. So which shop should Amina go to? And please explain why. There is Dr. Ismat that says that it's going to be shop number 1. All right. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the time and looking at the moderator's comments here. I'm just going to quickly brush over how you can use AI very quickly. But before we do that, let me just wrap up this activity. So the multilingual landscape is something that your students experience in their way to the classroom. By asking them to examine that and be conscious of their environment, you're helping them to develop knowledge about the self and the society. By asking them to assist Jiawei and Amina in finding the store, there is the skills of discovery and the skills of interaction that could be developed, the skill of mediation, because they will mediate the visit to the store and then linguistically speaking, support Jiawe and Amina to do so. And you can take it a step further and make it action-oriented, therefore develop critical cultural awareness by creating a project where you ask them to select a store and inquire about the name choice and the decision to use English or any other languages. So experiential learning, ethnographic studies, interviews, they go to the store and they collect information. Maybe the information they collected is in a different language, but then when they come to the classroom, they are translating these information and mediated the information to you in English, and that would help them develop their critical cultural awareness, and this whole experience could be considered intercultural. You can use more critical themes that speak about power relations and coloniality, for example. This is a store in London, in High Street, Kensington, quite a posh area, where a friend of mine in 2018 went to take a cafe in a shop. So basically, they shared this in their counter, and it says, "Help us in raising £650 to send a cow to Rwanda." And at the moment in 2018, when we saw that, my friend and I were really, as Africans, we were really disturbed by it and really shocked by the fact that a store that makes millions is asking people to buy a cow, one cow. So helping your students to find critical themes like these and reflect about the charity model, reflect about the colonial history, is one way, again, to push the student to reflect critically about the reality we live in, and so on and so forth. So using AI is something that you can rely on, and basically you simply ask ChatGPT to help you design activities that are that promote open-mindedness, respect, and attitude and of diverse cultural practices, and you can make it about anything really. I made this one about the birthday. And then there was a dialogue between people who celebrate birthdays differently, and different families celebrate birthdays differently. So you can generate texts like these where there is complex and diverse narratives.
That's lovely. Amina, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to stop you. It was so interesting, and there were some really interesting questions, but because what you were saying was perfect and giving us some really interesting examples of how to actually develop these really complex skills in class. I just thought, okay, this is, everyone was really interested, and lots of really positive comments coming in. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for bravely continuing despite the cough.
It was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
It's been absolutely great, and thank you for sharing, and we'd love to have you back and to hear more about how you can use AI as well to develop these competencies. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody. We've got one final session starting in 15 minutes, but thank you to Anne, who's now gone, Melissa, who is moderating, and Wayam as well, who's moderating on Facebook. So Amina, fantastic, thank you so much, and we'll say goodbye to everybody now. See you in 15 minutes for the next session.